and most importantly, to the outside marketplace. It obviously became a very successful company of its own right, and became #1 on the iPhone charts just a couple of years ago. And Steve Jobs himself immediately became aware of the popularity and the potential for Siri. So he bought the company soon after the B round, and now it's created a tremendous amount of wealth for Apple shareholders. When that purchase was made, I think Apple stock was around $200 a share, and last I was looking at Apple stock, it's closing in at $650 a share. So one could argue that Siri made an awful lot of money, and a lot of people happy in society as well who are using Siri. So that's not atypical of many of our new ventures, and that's why we restrict ourselves to only 3 to 6 per year. Others might say, and have challenged us as to why we're not doing more, but we really want to make high-quality ventures. Let's now turn to Silicon Valley. What makes Silicon Valley the world's technology-driven innovation capital? I know you've heard a lot about Silicon Valley. What I hope to do is, in this little section, try to point out a few subtleties that you may not have heard of that I think are quite important in technology incubation and commercialization. Silicon Valley, of course, has been around for quite a few years. People think of who have just discovered Silicon Valley, it's just been a few years in the making, but actually, one could say, started back in 1939, so over 70 years ago, with Hewlett and Packard starting up their company, Hewlett-Packard, of course. And it's progressed on through with a lot of different industries and a lot of different new companies, not just the ones that are on the top of the graph, but the ones that are in the blue section here, in a wide variety of verticals, such as clean tech, biotechnology, drug discovery, medical devices, in addition to all the ICT. Silicon Valley, we think, is the most complete model, and of course everyone studies it. We think that the most important part of Silicon Valley is not so much that people are there to have their initial goal of making money, but in fact, the founders of companies that I talk to, and many of them are either at Stanford University or in the Mid-Peninsula area, are all interested in achievement. That is, getting their products or services out into society so that it can do good for their customers and their markets. Of course, we have the 3 of the top 10 R&D universities in the area and a lot of global clusters and so on and so forth, with tremendous amounts of venture capital. As a matter of fact, we have about 3 times as much venture capital in Silicon Valley as any area in the United States. I think the next one down is Boston, Massachusetts. So we love to study Silicon Valley and see what we can get from it. One of the things that Silicon Valley has is an excellent balance of inventors, which are technical people, and entrepreneurs, or business people. Again, I think this is a little bit of a subtlety because people from afar view Silicon Valley as mostly technical people. In fact, you need both to have successful new ventures. And incidentally, in my travels around the rest of the world, and we're in about 20 countries with active programs, most of the schools that I visit, the business schools, are not teaching anything around entrepreneurship. So the poor scientists and researchers who are trying to get their products out, commercialized into the marketplace, could use a lot more help from these business schools in basic entrepreneurship techniques. Now, in Silicon Valley, entrepreneurs think global from inception. I don't know how many of you knew, but over 50% of the startups in Silicon Valley are started up by people who come in from outside the United States. In fact, I was not surprised to see that China and India are a couple of the top countries that entrepreneurs come from. But one thing I was very surprised to see is number 6 on that list is Iraq. They're not afraid of failing. In fact, they're proud of learning from their failures and moving forward. Many, including me, think that this is a huge contributor to the risk-taking attitude that they all have. And of course, there are lots of quotes here around learning from failure, and I've just added just a few. Finally, a factor that is not talked about so much is the way that Silicon Valley founders move quickly when a new market opportunity emerges. This is called the need for speed and was carefully documented in this recent article out of the Financial Times under entrepreneurship. how fast you execute on big ideas when the market opens up can mean the difference between a huge success and an also-ran or a mediocre company. So that's a quick summary and some insights into some not so well-known aspects of Silicon Valley. Why don't we spend just a minute or two on Stanford University, which is, of course, centered right in Palo Alto, California. How does Stanford fit in? Why are they so good at technology innovation? Well, here you see here not just buildings, but faculty and students which crave being on the leading edge of science and technology. And I think that that's what really makes Stanford unique and standing out. It seems they all come from all over the world to Stanford to learn how to make a big impact on the world. For example, this is a cover sheet from the business school, which I'm a part of at Stanford. And there are many, many courses around entrepreneurship and innovation at the business school. And a number of profs are actually doing some very serious research on the subject. In fact, I'm associated with a prof who's now doing a project for the World Economic Forum on entrepreneurship and what's going on outside the US in entrepreneurship, interviewing over 1,000 entrepreneurs worldwide. Students from outside the US at the business school now number over 40%, and find that many of them are in my classes and in other classes, all wanting to go back to their countries to start up a new business and want to learn the best techniques. Another first is being on the frontier for how design is so important in commercializing technology. The D School, standing for design, is famous despite not giving out any degrees. In fact, it's a watering hole, so to speak, in the center of campus where students from every school can come together and bring new ideas to life. And it's become the new model for how many universities are setting up their equivalent of D schools. So what are some Stanford University, I'll call them takeaways? Well, first, the Office of Technology and Licensing, or OTL, is quite strategic to Stanford. It was founded over 40 years ago. So once again, please don't think that these things are kind of overnight successes. It does take quite a while. OTL has been active already in 170 plus companies with equity stakes and so on. And there's some really big winners, but it's a very tiny percentage. If you're interested more, I suggest you go to the OTL website on the Stanford University website. There's an enormous amount of information there. Second point here is technology and scientific innovation is not only encouraged at Stanford University, but it's really become a hallmark of the school. Stanford now has many entrepreneurial programs, not just at the business school or the engineering school, but also the med school and other schools on campus. And finally, the policy for distribution of the IP proceeds is very progressive. It used to be that tech transfer offices would keep all of the proceeds themselves. But Stanford has been on the forefront of allowing faculty members and students also to participate in those kinds of things. So the conclusions are that it takes a comprehensive program, that it's about quantity, it's about quality, and it's about a reward system. All these things matter when it comes to having these kinds of technology programs on campus. Quickly now, what are some other successful models or programs of technology innovation, especially in university settings? Well, the first that I'll point out, I spent some time at our National Science Foundation in Washington, D.C. And it turns out that they have had a program since the 1970s that's now active on 59 campuses throughout the United States. This is a program which leverages the U.S. federal government, state governments, industry as key players, small businesses, universities, and even community college. So it really is a comprehensive program in a lot of these university locations. It's the opportunity for industry to effectively, through the NSF, fund important research in selected areas in these university campuses and have actually students work and researchers work on this research so that things can be commercialized very rapidly and students and researchers can see their projects get out into the marketplace right away. And it's really had a great success. A second, of course, is the MIT Deshpande Center for Technology Innovation, which has been established for over now at MIT, and it's for over 90 projects. The third, I won't mention too much because I think you had a visitor last year from Finland's Aalto University, the first innovation university combining a number of schools. And the fourth is an important one to mention. It's put really Chile on the map. 19 million people in Chile, not known for entrepreneurship, but now they have programs called Startup Chile and Mercado, where they're bringing entrepreneurs from all over the world, 1,500 applications last year from entrepreneurs all over the world to come into Chile and start businesses. We're quite involved with that, SRI is that well. Finally, the emergence of the technology incubators has really happened. I think that there are a lot of statistics on this, and we've seen tremendous growth. The one that I'm most impressed with is nearly 40% of all incubators are technology incubators, not just business model incubators. And on the cover of this slide, you'll see a very new book, just came out last week, called The Launchpad, and it talks in detail about Y Combinator, which is one of the most famous technology incubators in the world. If you want a real insight into a technology incubator, I suggest you read this book. It's an easy read. The talent pool is getting younger every day, and of course, many of these companies are now founded, these famous companies are now founded by students, where in the past it's been the middle-aged. So finally, let's sum up. What can Badr, CACST, and Saudi Arabia learn from these experiences? Well, the world is filled, of course, with an ecosystem that involves no longer just government, industry, and education, but really this whole area of technology and startups and SMEs plays an equal and important part. And Saudi Arabia, with the programs that are just mentioned here on this slide, has already, just in the last few years, made huge strides in developing a technology commercialization and incubation program. A scholarship program getting students out into the outside world and then coming back with lots of great experiences is bound to help. The kingdom has already begun to show great progress in scholarship and invention. And you can see while these numbers are small, the trends are correct and they're headed in the right direction. SRI has been partnering with Saudi institutions for quite a while now, with CACST. And you can see some of the other organizations, K-Care, KAUST, Imam University, Princess Noura University, and so on, in terms of helping them out with their strategic planning, particularly as it relates to technology commercialization. As I close, developing effective innovation institutions is hard work and takes time. Many countries, I know, we see these around the world, are heavily involved in R&D, but they've not succeeded in being truly innovative. It's easy to build, it's a lot easier to build buildings than it is to set up organizations that have the right structure on paper, investing in R&D and so forth. The most difficult thing, though, is to develop the knowledge, the experience, the innovation ecosystem, and effective norms. As a very famous entertainer said, what people don't realize is that it takes 20 years for us to become an overnight success. So it does take a long time. We've been in this business for over 30 years studying innovation principles throughout many organizations, universities, commercial sector, government sector, and so on. And it seems to be getting more and more sophisticated every day. Some final thoughts for Badr and CACST. 4 thrusts that can really move the needle. First, accelerate the research, development, and innovation institutional structure, emphasize applied research, the area that we work in, and promote awareness of programs. 2, build deep relationships with institutions in the best locations, which you're already starting to do. 3, increase the quantity of projects and demand high quality as well. Set high standards and stay with them. And finally, learn and aggressively apply meaningful best practices from others. We're proud to play a role in the Kingdom's innovations. Thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to spending time with the panelists as they discuss this important subject. And I leave you with our most important innovation, which is really the way that we work. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for the great presentation. But still, innovation. When we talk about innovation, does this require entrepreneurial skills? I mean, the way we innovate research, but not necessarily with the commercial value. Is this counted, will be counted as innovation?
Yeah, I actually think that entrepreneurial skills are incredibly important. I've been asked already, you know, are entrepreneurs born or can they be made? And I'm a great example, at least I like to think I'm a great example of somebody who was made into an entrepreneur. I certainly wasn't born one. And when I mention all of these students who come to Stanford, many of them have worked for large companies in industry, and they've never been entrepreneurs before. They've got a technical background, a master's in electrical engineering or physics or what have you, and they want to learn. They know the technical aspects, and they've run a big business, but they don't have the skill sets for running a smaller business and getting things off the ground. And those are the kinds of techniques that can actually, I think, be taught, and we find that they go on to be very, very successful. They get funded, they build companies. They already have had strong managerial capabilities in the training that they've received at these larger companies and at Stanford, and it's amazing to see how well rounded they become as entrepreneurs.
So either it's not enough that the person himself will be entrepreneur, the environment should be entrepreneurial?
The environment, it's really important to have a supportive environment and ecosystem. So not only, you know, people think, is it just money? No, it's not just money. You have to have